I'm not sure who was here last week or a couple weeks ago. You can raise your hands or, and hi, everybody. Hi. And who's new? Hi. Welcome, everyone, welcome. Last time I talked about what it means to be a department head. I discussed the business, and I discussed research, and I discussed set etiquette, and we talked about a lot of things. Is there anything from the holdover from last time that anyone wanted to ask me before I get started today?
I have questions about negotiating rate and when is it appropriate where you go negotiate above scale?
Okay.
Anytime you want.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rate, there's a set rate in the union. When you're not in the union, you can negotiate from here to wherever you want to go. That's a completely different world. And my suggestion is to talk to other makeup artists, if you're not in the union, who are in various, unions with agencies, and ask them what they're getting, so that you have an idea of what's fair negotiation, what's not fair negotiation. In our world, in the union world, there's a set pay scale per tiered movie, perhaps, but you can always negotiate above, which I highly suggest, and I'm sure Dee would as well, depending upon the movie, and the project, what's going on, what is required, etc. There's nothing wrong or negative about negotiating. A lot of people like to have agents, so they don't have to deal with the money part. Some people don't have agents and negotiate just fine. It's really a matter of.
And if you have a star behind you, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, if you have a star behind you, forget about it. You get a 12-hour guarantee every day that the star is signed to the movie. Is that correct?
It depends.
Ish.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you have a star behind you, you can ask for any amount of money you want, because if they say I'm not doing the movie or I'm not doing the project without her, then don't go crazy. Don't make it so that the production feels like they're being held hostage. But you can find out what the top rate is for anybody else who's in the same boat as you are, and ask for it. All they can do is say no.
Exactly.
And then you negotiate down a little bit.
And if you're doing hair and makeup, you can negotiate even higher for that actor or actress. If you're doing Mahershala Ali and you're doing his hair and his makeup, or Kate Blanchett, or J. Roy Allen, who always does Meryl Streep, who does her hair and her makeup. And there used to be a woman called, what was her name, Ilona?
Yeah, Ilona Herman.
Ilona Herman did, at the time, Nicolas Cage, and she made a significant amount of money per hour. And that was for the first 8 hours. And then you go to overtime till 10, and then depending upon what's happening, these days it's 14, it used to be 12, double time, etc. Oftentimes a person who's a personal gets a 12-hour guarantee. And if the actor's not working that day, the makeup artist also is always on hold for the days that that actor is assigned to that film. If I'm not
because you can't take another job.
You can't take another job.
If you can't take another job, then they have to pay you for sitting around waiting with your actor, And if your actor only works 2 hours that day, you still get paid 12 hours.
You get paid 12 hours?
You can't go anywhere else, Especially if you're on location.
You're on location. Here's the great thing. You're on location, you get paid your 12 hours, you get paid your per diem, you get paid your kit, you get paid for your car rental, and your lodging.
They pay for you to stay there, they give you a car, they give you money to eat on. This is union stuff, but I would imagine this is even non-union. But that's all negotiable too.
It's all negotiable. When you get to that point, it depends upon the project. And so when you get to that point, if you have questions, you know how to contact me, for example. You need to contact other people that are doing that particular type of job. It brought me to a point that I found this today and I wanted to show you all because I thought this was kind of really fascinating. A couple of years ago, almost every makeup in town was called for this commercial. It was a Dell commercial with Jeffrey Wright, who's a black actor who was in the Hunger Games, and he's in everything. He's in everything. Jeffrey Wright. If you go to my website, you'll see him. Anyway, it was directed by Tom Hopper, who directed, Les Miserables, you know, with Hugh, you know, that my boyfriend, the Wolverine.
Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman, yeah, your boyfriend.
I should
No,
tell
wait, he's my boyfriend.
I should tell that story. I really should tell that story. Hugh Jackman. Anyway, the guy's this huge director, and he handpicked the makeup artist that was going to do this stuff. So he called everyone that we know. And I literally, he sent me this, you know, they sent all of us, because I talked to other makeup artists eventually. These were the research boards that I did, okay, without getting paid, in order to get this commercial. This is, he wanted to see every kind of makeup. This is all just for one 3-day commercial, okay? Just to give you an idea. It's about fantasy. I had to find all sorts of different looks. He had this kind of girl, and she was sort of dressed like this. And then after I did all of this, I had to go in and do a test. And then I was hired. I later talked to friends that both B and I know, and they had been asked for the same thing, and they became so frustrated, they just sort of said, forget it. I'm really glad I did it, and I feel very fortunate that I got the commercial, but I had no idea that it was such a big deal until later when I spoke to some friends of ours, you know. But this is an example of, this is what happens. You know, if you want to get a job, you might hear about it, get called about it. This is the kind of effort that this is what I believe, that one has to put forth to show that they want the job. You know, here's the prince. I had to show this guy every manifestation of a prince. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Every different kind of coloration of eyeshadow he wanted to see. Thank you so much for keeping that up. You know, our little girl, you know, one of the Fannies, who kind of resembled the girl who got the part, who ended up, she's really lovely, I'm trying to think of her name. She went on to get one of those Marvel TV shows. She was a sweetheart. But anyways, I'm not trying to push my website, but if you do go to my website, you go to commercials, you'll see it, and you'll see her. Natalie something, fabulous little girl. But I thought that, thank you so much. I thought that was incredible. But I thought this is really great for me to show them because this is the kind of thing, this is the kind of effort that one has to put forward. It's sort of like when we get ready to do a film, when we worked together in the past, me and myself, we just don't go in 2 weeks before and do tests for the Hunger Games. We do weeks and months and weeks of research that we're not being paid. But in the end, it pays off, if you will. And if you really want to succeed at your job, you have to do all this, you know, it's imperative, I think, to do this kind of work, to do this kind of research for yourself, for the project, to understand the project, to have a vision, to be able to show the director, to show how much you care, your interest. So one thing we were talking about last week was, and I happened to find this, you know, this is from Mockingjay 1 and 2. I can show this now, but it talks about, you know, all the district breakdowns. You can see how elaborate this is. Can you all see? You know, this is the kind of
Paragraphs, can't really tell.
Can't tell. Can I walk
You
around?
can tell them what it is though. There was, what they did was we had a description of each one of the districts and what they looked like, how they were dressed, and what their makeup was supposed to be. And this was something that we had to, you know, to convey to all the makeup artists because each district had a specific look with specific colors that we needed to use on them. So we put kits together for all the artists with the district numbers on them so they knew which colors to use on which districts.
And each district had its own, I'll just read you, this is a short one. District 3's primary industry is generally electronics, though it is known for making various mechanical products. So BT and Wireless, who were Jeffrey Wright and Amanda Plummer, they had some weird look. You know, I had her, the makeup we did on her was this kind of weird distress. She looks like she had eczema. And he had some weird quirky kind of stuff going on. So each district was very obviously easily discernible. This district looked like that, but there's a big, here's the first description, that's step 1, and then it's up to us to sort of start looking at the research, coming up with ideas, meeting with the director, meeting with the production designer, meeting with the costume designer, meeting with the set decorators, looking at the different color of all the environments. One environment might be black, one is dark green, like this color, and everything has to be, you know, everything has to come together. So there's so much that goes into that design of each district or each look or that one, whatever, 35-minute commercial, you know. Those of you who are non-union, I'm sure you've worked on various commercials where you have the client and the agent and the client and the agent and then the costumer and the hairdresser and the client goes like this. About to roll, and then the agent says no. And this goes on for an hour.
Yeah,
You know,
really.
I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and so that's that business. And the film business is not quite as extreme. I'm just giving you an idea of, this is just, I consider this to be really important, to collect and to look at these things, because if V goes through this, for example, and we're on the movie, and she's talking to Francis Lawrence, and he says, oh, I want that. I love that eye. I want that, that's what I want. Okay, we take this out, we have it, we blow it up, we get different pictures of it, we get different ideas of it. These are the kinds of things that you really need to take the time to do. Okay, is to research and research and research and research. This was for the Capitol. You know, we did those crazy makeups. Obviously, we have all of our own creative ideas, but it does certainly is wonderful to do extensive research and see what else you might want to embellish or add to or create or recreate or show. It's important to show the director, because sometimes the director has got so much going on in his head, and to give him an idea about what we're thinking. Because in the case of the Hunger Games, and I think we will agree with this, the writer was really generous with us. In the whole situation, we really got to create how those people looked. You know?
And it was also like, no, we don't, this is what we don't want to see. Please don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. It was
Like if they see a picture, oh no, take that out, we don't want to see any of that. So it's always helpful, and a lot of times you don't have that in your head. Maybe you're tired. It's like it helps to take pictures, so it kind of gets your creative juices flowing. You know, that's why I made all those Pinterest files for the school, so that you can go through these Pinterest files now and look and get ideas for when you start doing your martial art classes or any of your crazy stuff. There's complete makeups in there, there's creatures, there's sculptures, there's all kinds of cool stuff. So it just gets your juices flowing, because, you know, you guys are, you know, useful. You don't have all this cachet of all these things in your mind that you've seen, or all the movies that we've seen, and all the makeups that we've seen over the years that we've been doing this. So it's really helpful just to see what other people have done. You know, it just makes you think, oh yeah, or you can pull this from there or that from there. You can, you know, it helps, all this reference helps just to build your knowledge in your head for you.
Absolutely, and you pull things. I find things that I did 20 years ago. Remember, I don't know who was here last week. I told you I had to make those guys look like 60,000-year-old titans. Those guys from that one movie in Canada. Okay, so what I was going to discuss with you today was doing a period movie, doing a period piece. That's a whole different ball of wax. So I did a movie called The Free State of Jones. There are trauma wounds in this movie, but there's only one scene of trauma wounds, and really the movie is about the story of Matthew and Mahershala Ali. And Matthew went to the Golden Globes, and he had this beard. You know, he had this crazy beard, and he was speaking with an accent from Mississippi of his new character, Nude Knight, for this movie. And I immediately called the director and I said, this is not a movie about injuries. This is a movie about facial hair. And the person who's going to be right next to Matthew almost at all times is Mahershala Ali. And Mahershala does not have a beard, and his facial hair has to look real and perfect at all times, as does everyone else around him, and his hair. So this goes back also to budgeting for a movie. I said, I want someone to call it, the head of casting in New Orleans, which is where we shot it, call right now every single person they're casting and tell them to start growing their facial hair and growing their beards. Otherwise, you're going to spend a fortune on facial hair and beards. And I think I mentioned to some of you last time, there are just only some people who are specialists in facial hair. And again, it doesn't mean that someone's not a good makeup artist. It just means they have not had that experience, or they just didn't spend 3 years laying hair on a film, or what thus and such. So I fought really hard to have the two people that I had with me. One who was and they're both facial hair specialists, one who can ventilate, which means make a piece right in situ, in case something ripped in that humid weather, stuck in the middle of a swamp, in the middle of nowhere, You know, on a film where people don't want to spend a lot of money and you've got to just pull things out of your, grab it out of your hat. Everything about the movie is designed by me. The character of Matthew is done by a makeup artist called Felicity Bowring. And so we discussed it. There were very specific environments. There was one environment with orange clay. There was one environment with yellow clay. There's another swamp with green clay. We had to change the lighting for Mahershala because he was going to look too ash, but there was so much green coming from the swamp. So all of these things had to be considered at all times. At the same time, the actors had to be done on time, mind you, in this heat. Sometimes we were in trailers that were on the edge of a swamp with little alligators snapping around.
Huh.
True. In any case, in a period film, you see everyone and you see everything, and I don't care who you are, tell me that when you see a movie, you don't notice everything. No one's ignorant in this room, right? And so I was really exigent about saying, so I had to study really profoundly the history of 1862 and 1865 and Mississippi and the differentiation between the states at that time and what was going on. And the most amazing thing about that period of time for us, all of us as makeup and hair people, is it's the only time in American history that every kind of facial hair was worn. When you look at these pictures, you won't believe it. People had goatees, sideburns, beards, you name it, short sideburns, long sideburns, but they didn't have sideburns from 2015. They didn't have anything from 2015. So I would come on the set, and after everyone was filming themselves, and I could see, what's your name? I'm sorry.
Alyssa.
Alyssa?
Yeah.
Alyssa, she's got to go. Why? Her sideburns, And it was this big argument, and then you have to go. And somebody would have to fix you, or you'd have to really go bye-bye. Not because there was anything wrong with you personally, but one doesn't want to do all of that work. And it would be logical for the producers to not want their film to not succeed because someone's watching a movie, and somebody's looks like in 1994, and the film took place in 1862. And there's also a big difference between 1862 and 1865. So, and I mentioned this last time, the great thing about filmmaking and the film business and the business that we're in is we learn so much. We learn so much about history, about people, about music, about society, about color, when was lipstick created, why, what was happening. We learned so much about this country. I mean, it's just kind of extraordinary. It was like a history lesson on top of it. So facial hair, facial hair, facial hair. Facial hair was a constant battle on this thing. Plus it was like 100% million humidity. So that was pretty intense. And there were injuries. So here's Mahershala. I bet he had a bit of hair at the time, but as you can see, and he's also got sensitive skin, okay? So all of these things have to be taken into consideration. He's African American. Look at the color of his skin. He has to be lit differently than the Caucasian guy standing next to him with all this green around him. All of this stuff. So how do you prepare for these period pieces? As I mentioned last time, if you really want a movie like this, you might do 3 months of research and you won't get paid for it. It will all will out in the end because you will end up getting the biggest movies on the planet. People will know that you've done your homework. They know that you care. They know that you're going to work hard. They know that you're knowledgeable. You bring a lot to the table. You understand what's required. You understand what's going on. You know the history. When you come into a room like that in a production meeting, you're sitting around and you're very quiet, but the time comes around at the table and they ask you a question, and you say, no, I'm sorry, but this hair has to look like this, or it's incorrect. And you show the picture reference and you discuss why. And you also discuss what it's going to entail to lay hair on a black man, and what kind of hair it has to be, and skin sensitivities, and all of these various things. Okay. They gave me 45 minutes to do something that takes 2.5 hours. And I did it in 49 minutes. They were yelling, but so is the film, especially as the film is. So this is all about painting and modeling. And I think the biggest problem that people make with bruises is things don't sort of move any further. There would be bruising of the cut around here. You see there's bruising here. This is a great little cut. But you see how it's come in around here. So it's believable. The next one in particular is, this was done really quickly. This is just a piece. This might even be a piece of A and B third degree. Sculpted on as fast as possible. Might have been done even in situ on the set. Sculpted on, painted on. I think I used Fleet Street. We used Fleet Street. Some makeup blood, the goop blood. You can create all kinds of things. You can create whatever you want. There's no right way and there's no wrong way. I use coffee grounds. I always use them. I put them in here. I squirt them in with a little tiny pointed edged sort of bottle. Squirt, squirt. That's where you get this texture. You see this little dust up here? Then I take the rubber dust and I make it even smaller and I put a little squirt thing all over the face. See that texture? He looks like he's dirty, but he looks like he's been dirty for days. I have about 3 minutes to get this done and they're screaming to get off the set. So what do? Boomity boom boom, have to blend, have to add the blood. How can I draw this? How can I bring this together really quickly? I would splash a lot of Illustrator all over this right away and I would just go boom, 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 boom. Another really great trick, all of you, is to take the end of a Q-tip, dip it in alcohol, believe it or not, put it in white Illustrator and take it right down the face. We did this on Jeffrey Rush in Pirates. It all of a sudden gives a reverse kind of weird texture scarification, and you're done. And it's not going to move. I don't like personally blue marble. I use aqua. Is it aqua?
The hairspray?
No, sorry, it's blue. Final seal or blue marble for a lot of reasons. Everything depends also upon the product. Green marble is good for certain products only. With other products, you're going to have problems. So on something like this, I would use final seal, not to mention for the after and toxicity. So if you look at these pics, I'm going to explain more. So we had to make this scene look like there were, 100,000 soldiers. We had maybe 50, 60 soldiers. So we had to really take all these soldiers and principalize them, make them look like they were the #1 star of the movie. Every single person has makeup on. Every single person has been looked at, their fingernails, under their nails, under their chin, inside their ear, underneath their head. When they take their cap off, I want to see a line that's not dirty, Every single person's been touched or they won't go on camera. What does that mean? That means I better hustle and I better have a really great team that's going to hustle. Movies like these, this is a really high pressure film that did not give us a lot of time, whereas on Pirates of the Caribbean we had ample time to do really, I think, great makeups. But this is a good challenge because it teaches you to be quick on your feet, and then you come up with little surprises. Oh, I like this. Okay, the hot coffee grounds, great. Little spritz of makeup forever, a little bit of the sweat, just a little tapping. That particular sweat, as opposed to any other, with an orange sponge, a little bit of rubber spray, done. A little bit of final seal, done.
So what is rubber spray?
They're little rubber dirt, it's called. You have to sit down and look at the call sheet. Okay, you look at the call sheet. I have 10 principal actors. Let's say they have to be ready at 8 a.m. I've got to start them, let's say, at 4:30 a.m. And then I have 400 or 300 extras, and they have to be ready at that time. That means dress. Remember, it takes time to get dressed. Hair, armory, guns, all of it, and makeup, and then I want my crew on set ready to go at the very minute because I probably won't be there yet until I get there with my lead actor, ready to roll camera and make sure that everything's all right and pull her or somebody out if they don't look right. That's a calculation that you make depending upon the budget and the manpower, and you have to be logical about it, and you have to be very rational and calm and economical and say, listen, it's going to take 2 hours to do this makeup. I could maybe calculate that, I don't know how many of us are in this room. I don't know, 50 people, let's say? I don't know. It take 50 people, 15 minutes each to do somebody, that's 1 hour, that's something you calculate. Okay, so that's a 3.5 hour pre-call. Yeah. Believe me, production doesn't want that to happen. They might want a 2.5 hour pre-call, which means into breakfast time, the first round goes to set, and everyone else is still killing themselves to get the rest of the people done. which is also complicated as a department head because you have to make sure that your crew has eaten. This has to do with the union. And so there's all sorts of stuff that's happening at the same time that you are being a makeup artist. And I emphasized this last time, but I will emphasize this again. It's show business. So they want to make their day, the AD department. So making their day means, oh, you're never going to see her. Just send her to set. Yes, you're going to see her. You better not let her go anywhere until she's done. Or you chase her onto set, or you jump in front of the camera. I don't know what you do. You just don't let that happen. At least I don't let that happen. This is just a close-up set. You can kind of see Matthew's, this is a different period of his beard now. It's a little blurry with Gugu, but Felicity had to do some beard extensions on Matthew because his beard was constantly changing. And it was getting a little bit grayer, and he was getting a little more aged, so she did some aging here. Everyone has their own way of aging. I took a really amazing black woman, and she was about 42, and I made her look like she was 101. And I did it all with Bluebird. And I thought she looked amazing, and they ended up not using her. But this gets better. There were 2 of them, and they sent them home without having their makeup removed. And these women tried to scrub this is really bad actually, so this is another point I'm trying to make. They tried to scrub their faces. So, that's just never done. Something like that, I've said this before and I'll say it again, and you remember this, all of you. If you're doing any kind of prosthetic at all, or any kind of fantasy makeup, or any kind of effects makeup, even if it's a little cut, if it's an application, you make sure that you go to your producer, AD, whomever it is, and say, I need X amount of time to remove this prosthetic, this piece, this makeup from this actor. If not, we could damage the actor's skin, it could cause us problems, and if the actor's going to work every day, we want the actor to be perfect for every day, so it makes just sense all the way around. But again, that has to be factored into your day, Here's another picture of Mahershala. This is in his 1852 beard and hair. He also, you can't see it, he also has a scar here and a scar here around his neck.
What adhesive did you use for him since his skin was sensitive?
Oh gosh, what did I use on him? Let me just give it a thought, because that was a few years ago. First of all, I only used grapeseed oil on his skin. Very sensitive skin. I used RCMA makeup on him, and I did use spirit gum. Spirit gum and then I would have it remove anything if it's 99% alcohol, especially with black men, with African American skin, it's the best thing to not get ingrown hairs. It's what's in every single one of those products, like Tend Skin. It's 99% alcohol. So that's what I did. And I was also incredibly caring about his skin. I'm like that with all my actors. If you can maintain the skin during the day, if we took the beard off during the day, my friend Chris Evans took care of Mahershala's beard. We would put something on that would be soothing, a really delicate remover, generally oil, So things like that. Again, you're taking each actor into consideration. And I had asked Nikki Lederman about the Joker because Joaquin is vegan. I mentioned this last time. Did you have to use something special for him because he's vegan? And she said, no, he was fine. We used Mayron and we used matte colors. Whereas with Woody Harrelson on The Hunger Games, he is vegan and we did not use anything on him that was not natural. We created a natural glue. Most of the time his wig was not even attached. It was just set on. And that's that actor. So again, there are different actors who have different requirements, and those are the kinds of things, as I mentioned last time, that you must discuss with your producer. You must say, listen, Nikoletta there's an actor who has a peanut allergy that V and I worked with, and he can go into full anaphylactic shock if anybody even has touched a peanut and touches something else and gets touched in the trailer. So, people's systems are very sensitive. So it was spirit gum, but it was spirit gum used in a very delicate way. Spirit gum, if it's applied very carefully and you give it one pass and you get it a little sticky, it has to be applied very gently. You let it dry almost, and then you apply a second pass, a very little bit, very sticky, very tacky. Then you take your piece, I use chamois, and you delicately place the piece on. If you're using a piece. If you can hand lay the hair, then I would use Prosade, not Telesis. Prosade, 2. Prosade is white, everyone knows what Prosade is. A lot of skin seem to tolerate Prosade very easily. Very easily, it's great, it lasts all day long. If you can do that, you're gonna have the least amount of trouble, I think, with facial hair, especially in incredible humidity. But again, if you're in a very humid situation, you just kind of account for it. Okay, at a certain point, I'm gonna have to just lift that thing off and clean it and reapply it and give the actor a break. I'll negotiate that around the time that we're all having our 11:15 a.m. snack. Thinking ahead. We, as you know, or perhaps you don't know yet, but you'll soon find out, are always moving and are always on our feet. And if we get a 20-minute lunch, I'd be surprised, especially as a department head, because you're having your lunch and the AD department wants to come and talk to you, even though they're not supposed to do. They do. So next, I just want to show you this. I'm going to go through this whole thing. This, Matthew knew these fabulous war veterans that came from Texas. Obviously, they were contemporary war veterans from the Iraq War. I don't know if they were from the Gulf War, which means their injuries and their amputations were of this contemporary period. I'll show you the very awful pictures in a minute. The amputations at that time were horrific. And it's the only thing that they could do. They had so many people so injured and so infected, they barely had anything at all. They gave them some ether or some alcohol and they just had to saw off the limb. So what we did was make these pieces that slipped over their amputation and dressed it to look correct for that period. So I designed it. I had a great prosthetic team come in, fantastic. I let them commandeer that. You know, we discussed the design, of course. A department head cannot do everything. It would be illogical to do so, but the design is yours. And so you can go in and say, no, it's not quite right, or this is that. But no, there was a great team of people. Some of them were based in New Orleans. One came from North Carolina. Guys that I know from both ends of the country had to come in to create this scene. It was a very gruesome scene.
So they created the pieces beforehand, though?
The pieces had to be, so all the pieces, I oversaw the sculpt of all the pieces, all the injuries, all the everything. We did an in-shop sculpting in New Orleans on the ground, so I could see what was going on, yeah. And then they went to town and did, a really amazing job. Yeah, really fantastic job. Okay, next is, and I'm going to describe the history of this. Mahershala and the Maroons. If you know anything about this period of time, a lot of slaves escaped into the brush, and they were called Maroons. And Newt Knight, the character played by Matthew, escaped into the brush and lived with the Maroons. He ended up falling in love with and having a child with a black woman, and there is a whole huge Knight family. There's the white Knight family, this is true, the mixed and the black family, they all came together, they were in the film, and they all came together, and at a certain point during the film, he created what is called the Free State of Jones. It's a true story. He emancipated this one part of Mississippi. He was successful for a period of time. It's actually quite a fascinating story. Before we even started this film, I had my crew watch Glory with Denzel. I wanted them to see what that period of time looked like and to feel, especially there's a horrible scene where he gets whipped and he's just incredible, the agony of what those people went through. And I had everyone watch the Ken Burns, it's a 9-hour miniseries about the Civil War. I wanted everyone to know what we were dealing with. And I mentioned this last time, I'll mention it again. For me, it's very, very important that my crew knows that they're coming to work on this movie today with these people. You're not gonna work on these people, but you're part of this project. So I want you to feel like you're part of the project, to feel like you can be creative. One thing V mentioned when she was here, so I'm gonna segue for one moment, was, Francis might not like that, i.e. the director. And in fact, when we were doing the Capitol on Catching Fire, everyone did these amazing makeups and some of them just weren't right. So we sort of had to go through and say, I'm sorry, you have to change that. And artists are delicate people. So I always qualified and said, it's nothing that anyone's done wrong, it's not the look for this film. What we want is this. This is a completely different makeup than this person. This person just did a beautiful makeup, but it wasn't like this. This is what the director wants, so guess what? That person has to take the whole makeup off and do it again. And pretty quickly, and stay in a good mood, not take it personally, and understand it's just creativity. Take a great picture of the beautiful job they just did, because we might use it in a different scene, and not personalize it, okay? It's not a personal thing. It's just the way the movie is, and generally this comes from the director. So the director comes to me, if I'm the department, V, and says, I don't like that. I mean, when we did the very first Hunger Games, I think that Effie was tested for 4 days straight. I mean, we did so many, V did so many different makeups, and we were talking about it, and it was finally decided that this was the look. So a lot of times during camera testing is something that happens, unfortunately, not enough days before you start a film. So when we did Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, I was doing Dennis Leary's makeup. Dennis Leary was probably the most difficult person for the camera test because he has a lot of freckles, but he had sort of some blue and some red undertones. So it was really difficult to get the right color, the right lighting. And the lighting is really super important for everything that you do. So no matter what you do, and no matter what you're shooting, you have to find out what the scene looks like, because you might have to have your lights changed, I said this last time also, in the trailer for every scene. And you're not being crazy, you're just watching your job. Talk to the director of photography, and then talk to the director and say, look, this person's got to look the same color as the entire film, otherwise you're going to end up losing money. Back to money. I would use probably different terminology, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay, there's no right way or wrong way. When you're stuck in a situation and you have one palette, there's one palette I would recommend. It's the Viseart palette. I've used it forever. With this palette, you could do any makeup on the planet. You could age somebody. You could make somebody look stunning. You could make somebody look distressed. You could add a little bit of some of these various things and bruise somebody and then use a couple of different materials. I'm just saying, you can do a lot with a little. A lot with a little. You're artists. Be creative. Also, blood is very important when you are doing a movie. You have to go to the director during the camera test. You have to take a panel. You must paint a stripe of blood, of each type of blood and color of blood and texture of blood that you intend to use on the film, and put it on camera. Because believe me, they'll see in 2 seconds, oh, we can't use that. That's too orange, it's too bright. Her dress, for example, I'm using an example. Too bright, it has to be, more, more something sort of more this tone. There has to be more brown in it. And so it's a very easy way to come together, again, because we're always working out as a team. Now you're being considered of props, special effects, costume, makeup, hair, designer, director. Because a lot of times we're all throwing in there with the costume department and they might not have enough blood. So can they borrow some of our Fleet Street? Sure. Then will they take some and go make a big gallon for when they fall? Sure. Come together, work together, support each other. Okay? But check your blood and check the coloration of it to make sure that it's right. This is this horrible thing I showed you last week that made me sick, but this is in fact what the slaves wore, and they had bells on them, all of them, so that their owners could hear them. The movie was extremely upsetting for me to work on, and a lot of people for that matter. In this case, we just didn't do it with the bells, but this is where Mahershala gets these deep grooves, and again, he's sensitive, so I made pieces for him that wouldn't irritate his skin. At a certain point, there was one piece that was just not good, so I removed it and I painted it on instead. Well, that's a prop. Right. So it looks like it weighs 25,000 pounds. Prop, a material that resembles real iron, but it wasn't as heavy. This is a great picture. Unfortunately, you can't see the scenery because this is this kind of yellowy, weird color clay that had to be on all the actors and all their hair, in the creases, in their skin. Here's, I mentioned this last week, here's one of the slaves. The slave owners were really atrocious. They would either have like a heart right on the forehead of somebody that said JB. In other words, JB is the slave owner's name. Or like this. I opted to do something like this.
It was an HR. I put it on this guy. This guy was really great. He was a background actor who didn't have a speaking role, and he became a principal in a sense because he was always with Mahershala's group. Those group of guys were so wonderful and so fantastic. I couldn't have worked with a better group of people. But you notice his hair. That was correct for that time. When I show you the other research, you won't, you're going to say, what? I spoke about this last week. This is my 45-minute makeup that took 49 minutes. Suddenly they wanted Mahershala to be hanging from a tree with a smashed-in eyeball. Normally Mahershala would have had a piece made for him that is the color of his skin, and the only thing that I had in my stock was a piece from a brilliant makeup artist called Matthew Mungle, and we applied it. And I was working with a makeup artist, Anne Marie Hurley, who's really great, who does ventilating, and we just threw it together, and she had this great idea to use a plastic bag and kind of like a sharp plastic bag and take blood and kind of stick it on this piece. And then they took him to the set, and then they let him sit there for an hour and a half, and we couldn't touch him up. Which actually turned out to be really fabulous because the makeup just looked better and better and better. So this is another great thing sometimes about makeup. If it sits for a while, it gets, the crease, it goes into the creases of the neck, and it just starts to look more and more realistic. So, there are happy accidents. Here's research, ladies and gentlemen. This is the amount of research that I did for this film. These are the Confederate soldiers and all their variations of facial hair. Okay? Not only did I do this research, I had a class in New Orleans with Chris to have everyone come who was going to do the facial hair and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice speed so that when it came time, and we do fittings. So we had everyone come in who were going to be extras, and we fitted them with either a little goatee or whatever it was going to be, or if it was African American, they couldn't grow their hair quickly enough, whatever we needed to do, whoever was going to do the Afro tech. I find this fascinating because if you really look at this, I don't know if you want to pass it around, it's crazy, the different kind of facial hair. It's really crazy. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I was shocked. I was sort of like, there are just so many different, here are long sideburns, short. So we got to have sort of a heyday of creativity, if you will, with this facial hair. Any questions? No, first of all, I had a week-long training and week-long meetings with my crew. I demanded it. I think I drove the production crazy, but I said, can't make a movie like this unless this happens. Cannot. We have to be so organized. Everyone has to have a kit like this. Everyone has to understand this. So I had these all over this room, and on the day that certain things played, I had them up as much as I could in the trailer without being cumbersome. So the things that were relative to that day, and especially in background. So for all the background artists that were coming, I had these up. You better believe me. Here are the Union infantry. So there were some differences, but I'm just giving you an idea. This is what it takes, like, you guys, boom. This kind of research. These are real war notices. All of this stuff is completely authentic. These are all authentic pictures from that time. Okay, there were house slaves. You remember Tarantino's movie? They were completely different than the Maroons. Completely. Nothing, I don't know how you say in English. Nada que ver. Rien à voir. Not even close to anything. They were completely different. They had this very specific look. So you would know in 2 seconds that this is a house slave and not a Maroon. I bought books, all these books about, who asked me the question? About the Civil War and that entire period of time. And I read every book, and I watched the Ken Burns thing, and I made photocopies, and I picked the pictures that I thought were going to be the most important for my crew, for the movie, for the director, for the look, for the whole thing. Because if you're going to put your name on something, it can be the smallest little commercial that lasts one day, or it can be the biggest movie of your lifetime. You want everything to be right for yourself. You're the artist. So these are the Maroons. These are all the guys that ran away. So this is Mahershala's character and his little entourage of guys. So as you can see, they looked completely different also. Again, I'm showing you these, and thanks for your patience, so that you understand the magnitude of what it takes to make a period movie. It's no joke, right? Okay, and then in the middle of the movie, they go to the 1950s 50s because Newt Knight's great-grandson is marrying a white woman. And in Mississippi at the time, it was 1950-something, they said that he was black. Okay, well, and he's, he looks probably whitest of white, and this is actually a true story. I think it was eventually overturned, but, some of the original Knight family is in this scene, so it was actually kind of really cool. But, so I had to absolutely show my crew what everybody looked like at that time in Mississippi, not in any other state, and that particular year. I went to sorority houses. I mean, I had to do the craziest research. This was a filmmaker in Mississippi. These are some sorority houses. It was really important that everybody looked, white, black, mixed, whatever, correct. So, hence, research for that era. Right, so then I would make, this is the kind of thing you do for your team then. You make lip color palettes. These are the only palettes I want you to use. You make it really easy. So everyone's not going, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Not that you can't figure it out, but time, and time. Lip palettes, lip pencils, or not, for the era. Lip brush, tone of skin, eyebrow charts, that's it. What kind of lashes, nails, etc. If you're doing hair, hair. But it has to be correct. And then you just have to, and then you have to get it down to, I don't know, 15 minutes of makeup, and a beautiful makeup. So, everyone thinks it's so glamorous. It's glamorous, but there's a lot of work. Okay, this is, gets a little morose here, okay? But unfortunately, I've got to show it to you. These are actual pictures of like the amputees and the way that the camps looked. Yes. Yes, and also I had to have all my prosthetic people look at them and study them. This is the way that it looked. This is the bullet wound that I became not enamored with, but this had to be, because they used this kind of musket that created that kind of explosion in the head. So most of the bullet wounds had to look like this, or like that. I used a lot. Sorry. The amputations, like I said, had to look period correct. So there's a period correct amputation as opposed to, I know this is really morbid, I'm sorry. But it gives you an idea. Any of those of you who are doing prosthetics, when you're on a film like this, probably you would get a stump that has been sculpted. You'd put it over the person's stump and you would paint it and dress it to make it look correct. If the person's been taped up, then it's taped up and you have some blood or some dried blood seeping through. If the person has just been amputated, then you have to have probably a rig coming through with blood coming through it. Here are more, it's just kind of like, but it shows you the amount of research that I had to do. This was just for training all my peeps. These are what the fields actually looked like. I had to show them. This was also, and also this kind of thing helps props. This is how the bodies looked. They looked bloated, There's no way to imagine what something is supposed to look like correctly without having done the proper research. There's just no way. And once you possess the knowledge, then you can say, absolutely, I'm sorry, the stomach has to look like a watermelon. And they'll say no, and you'll say yes, and here's an example of it. Okay, the last but not least of this, then we'll go back to something more pleasant. Here's another one of those bullet wounds, to give you an idea. They look just like that. There's another one. They're muskets.
Yikes.
I know, it's just too much. Sorry, but so I kind of did my whole crew a favor by educating them. So they studied this all week long. Like I said, they practiced. We did blood. We did hair. We discussed the film. We broke everything down. We were ready to go. And when the trigger got pulled, we had to go. And it was nonstop from that moment on. It was muddy every day, humid every day. You have to dress accordingly. You have to be strong. I mentioned this last time. You have to be healthy. You have to drink a lot of water. You have to get a lot of sleep as much as you can. And you have to keep everything clean. And you have to try to be in a really great mood all the time. And you have to feel out your actors and see how they're feeling. And maybe they don't want to talk that day, But this is a completely different kind of makeup, which again requires a lot of research. And V and myself, had a lot of latitude thanks to the writer. She just let us create whatever we wanted. I mean, imagine how great that was. That these books were so popular, and she said, you guys just do whatever you want. They happened to love everything that we did, so that was great. Here are the blisters on Jennifer. V and I would be in the middle, I'm telling you, in the middle of the jungle in Hawaii, and we'd have to put these blisters on in a tent with the blisters up to here in mud, and it's not as glamorous as you think. We didn't do it in a trailer. In this case, I did this set of blisters because V had gone to New York for something, and Jennifer had just won the Academy Award, and we were doing the next day. God bless her. She was crawling around in the dirt, and There's Donald. There's Woody. There's Jenna. So this was interesting. All of them had to be covered in blood. The blood was a mixture of not stainable blood. So I had to test all these bloods that would just wash off and not stain the skin. And I had to prep all the skin with the DermaShield. They're making a blood now. I can't think, maybe you girls and guys can tell me, there's a name of it. It's not staining. Can't be used on blonde hair, by the way, no matter what anybody says, but it's not a staining blood. I think it's my blood. I think it's a version of my blood. Yeah, it's really great. However, it doesn't work with blonde hair no matter what anybody says. You have to, if you have a blonde haired actress, you have got to put a bald cap on them and put a wig on them. Because fake blood on blonde hair, no matter what it is, it's just a catastrophe. And then here's my version of Effie, which was fun. And then Pirates was another creative, character-driven movie. A lot of latitude to do what we wanted to do. That was a fantasy movie, so we weren't following a period of time per se. In Immortals, it was the same thing. It was a fantasy movie. We were not following a period of time. I've shown you this before. These are the Titans, and that was my inspiration. Was that crazy picture, that crackly look. And actually, one of my makeup artists drove all the way down from Montreal last week to visit me. She made some kind of van, and it was so fun to see her. And she said, we were talking about this makeup because there was a black makeup that I meant to bring a picture of Frida that I had to pour on all the actors, and it had to wash right off in the scene, and they had to look like they had nothing on their, had never been dirty. So it took me 3 weeks to kind of figure that out, and I used some black food coloring with some glycerin and some water and something else and some flour, and I tested it and tested it and tested it, and it just washed right off. This was not quite the same thing. This makeup, I wanted these guys to be in for 5 hours and then out, because it had, there was Gantrez, there are various things in this makeup that are too restrictive for me personally. I don't really like toxic things on people, as much as they were protected. It was not a makeup like the Thor makeups that somebody should sit in all day long. There are a lot of different things you can use depending upon what you're doing. Again, it's a combination, it's a confluence of different kinds of things. It could be Beta Bond, and then it could be, it could be DermaShield, and then it could be DermaColor on top of it, and then it could be something else. It could be even Tattoo Color and Illustrator with another protective layer. It just depends on what you're doing. If you're doing tattoos undersea, you've got to test. I work with a Bollywood actor, and he's covered with tats. I did all these covers and practices on myself, and I went and kept jumping in the Pacific Ocean. It wasn't quite as salty as the Indian Ocean, but I wanted to see, and the ocean in Thailand where we were shooting. But I wanted to see what was going to work. It ended up being a base of Beta Bond. I ran into Steve Laporte, whom you all know or have heard of, who's fantastic. And he's the one who suggested these various things because he had done a show called Lost in Hawaii. And he came up with again, happy accidents. He came up with a formula that was fantastic for doing this kind of stuff. I'm just going to talk about a film that I did, which is called Solace. It's with Anthony Hopkins, Jeffrey D. Morgan, Colin Farrell, and Abby Cornish. Abby Cornish is blonde. And I had this whole thing with the producers, and I said, you cannot not even allow one drop of blood to get on her blonde hair under any circumstances. And I told her that. I said, that'll be it for you. So we have to bald cap you, and I have to wig you. And even after I wig you, I've got to protect the wig, and I want to test the blood on the wig first. And then because there's this whole fantasy sequence where she's getting blood poured all over herself. And I said, and that's got to be a one-take wonder, and then that's it, because the wig's going to go and everything's got to come off. So I did a scene in Future Man where the two characters are all painted in blood. I had to hand paint and match that every time I did that makeup again, because it was so specific. Each little striation of blood. Well, you know, anyone who's blonde would know this, you know, I mean, who's got blonde hair. If you put blue dye on your hair, it's gonna stain your hair. You have to wait till your hair grows out, right? Or bleach it. And then if you bleach it, it might just break off and all fall out anyway. I mean, unfortunately. I was very blessed to do a film called Napoli Ever After with Sanaa Lathan. She asked me to do it. I did a film with her called A Perfect Guy. And in A Perfect Guy, I wanted her to look like a black Jean Harlow, like a really film noir, with this beautiful red lipstick and this kind of hair, and she just killed it. It was, you know, it was fantastic. I think the film cost $11 million to make, and it made $80 million or something, you know. And it was a really good film with Morris Chestnut and Michael Ealy, and I mean, I really enjoyed working on it. So a few years later, she asked me to do Napoli Ever After. And I worked with Larry Sims, who's a great hairstylist to the stars. He's like a Kim Kimble, just really fantastic African-American hairstylist. But at the time, we were thinking, we'll just make a cap with little tiny pieces of hair coming out of it and, you know, put it on her so she doesn't have to shave her beautiful hair that she's never shaved in her entire life. And the more that we all discussed it, she made and committed to the decision of shaving her head. And it was really great because I was just talking to the author yesterday. Her name's Trisha Thomas. She wrote all these Napoli books. Napoli Ever After, I don't know, there's several different names of the books. She was very much like Suzanne Collins in The Hunger Games. She gave me a lot of latitude to do what I wanted to do with Violet, who is Sanaa's character. And so Sanaa made this commitment to shave her hair on camera. So we did kind of a little test with a little cap, and she shaves her head. And during that period of time, I was in Atlanta, I started noticing white women, black women with shaved heads. And these weren't women that had cancer. These were women who decided that they wanted to be free of their hair. So I personally like to do projects that move me or that I believe in. If I am I'm so fortunate, I'm pretty selective. The only time I ever did a horror movie is because a friend of mine asked me to go out and finish a film for him with this guy called Rob Zombie. It was one of those Halloween movies. Well, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know who he was. He was in my trailer when I was doing this crazy makeup, and I thought he was some guy that needed to go to wardrobe. So I kept saying, I think you're in the wrong trailer. And he was kind of looking at me, and I said, he had this, you know, belt. I said, I think you need to go to wardrobe. And then somebody said, so Rob, what do you think we're gonna do in scene, whatever it was? And I went, oh, well, you must be Rob Zombie. But that movie was actually really funny, and I worked with Malcolm McDowell, and we were there sitting in this field in the middle of the night, and he's got all these groupies that were up on top of a mountain waiting for him, because he's this, I didn't even know now I know who he is. Everyone, including us and the actors, were trying to say, now how can we kill him this next time? With some antlers or the car? And it was just so ridiculous. It was sort of like, oh my God. So it was funny, it was funny, very gory, a lot of laughs. I didn't think I would enjoy myself on a horror film, but I actually had fun finishing that bit for another fellow makeup artist guy, prosthetic guy. Does anybody have any questions about anything? Yes. Yes, I would share everything, but I have to get my own stuff together, especially for wounds and things like that. The costume is very important, and I would also, of course, talk to the costume designer, make sure everything is right on point. I'm trying to remember that particular movie, and it's hard for me to remember, but I know we all collaborated together, very much so. Yeah, very much so, because in a movie like that, where things are moving so quickly, maybe somebody from the costume department wasn't able to be there in that moment, and they called me and they said, Nick, can you put some blood on that thing? Okay, do you mind, is it okay? Or can you, the hair person, can you pour some blood on, dark hair? Okay, is that okay? Okay, rather than, but yes, there's always a mutual collaboration. Hunger Games, I would go almost every day to the costume department and look and see what was going on and what was going to be worn and how and why, and what was the texture and what was the level of dirt that Francis wanted. And then you have to watch the continuity throughout the entire movie, At one point in one of the Mockingjays, They were really dirty and then they were suddenly really clean. We realized there had to be a bridge between that. And that happens when everyone's busy working. That's why I said it's not just the script supervisor's job or the hair, the costume department. It's our job to keep track of the continuity. And notice, oh, she has 2 earrings, even though it's not our department, and her hair's behind her ear. Make sure her hair's behind her ear for the next scene. And her glasses are on, and his glasses, and he's still holding his pen like that. Because people will notice all of those details.
So when you put the dirt, you do only makeup, only face and body, and costume designer do clothing, and hair department does.
Well, that gets tricky too. I think we have to work all together as a group. Because when everyone's standing outside and they're standing in a row, this can get a little complicated. And again, you've got to just keep your cool and make sure you're communicating with people, because I know that on one particular movie, my makeup artist did all this beautiful work and the costume department started blasting everybody with Fuller's Earth, which is a really powerful, not acceptable, actually toxic form of powder these days. And it just destroyed the makeups. And so we had to take the Fuller's Earth down, and I went and had an amicable conversation, and I just said, we have to try to really do this together, or we'll come and put, you can buy these masks that you put around here so that everything kind of matches. But if the clothing is really super heavy and the makeup is not, it's not going to work either. So this is a very good question, by the way. This goes back to communication and discussion and clarity right from the top of the day, so that everyone's on the same page. And you usually, as the department head, you go to the costume designer and the director and the production designer. You have a meeting, and then you make sure that everyone knows what's happening, so nobody's feathers get ruffled, somebody doesn't get mad, they don't think you're trying to tell them how to do their job. Because when people are getting rushed, they start to get, some people start to get a little antsy. It's just human nature. Bandaging. Yeah, bandaging is tricky also, because in the case of the last show that I did, the prop department handed me a big bag of bandages and let me just do my own thing. And I had their blessing, because it was just too specific. I had to put these wounds on, I had to cover these tattoos, I had to put a tattoo on, I had to put another tattoo on, and if something got moved, it was going to be a nightmare. So they were actually really great with me, and they let me and my team take that and put that on and add blood. Again, that's a question of communication. I don't think everyone needs to be so completely territorial. On the other hand, I have to say, don't come and squirt blood all over my lead actor's face. So there has to be communication. And generally there is, but those incidents do occur, they do. And they usually occur when everyone's in a hurry, and they're trying to get people through, and they've got people standing outside, and they're spraying them, right, or doing something to them. We had this happen on the Hunger Games in district, I can look in the book, I think it was the coal mining district. They were getting everyone really super dirty, and then, sort of V and I went out and said, this has to be more modified, it has to be a little bit more subtle. There has to be variations of it. Because it's like the gradations I showed you on that guy's face. It's more realistic, it's more believable. If you just throw black paint on someone, it's not exactly the look. Unless they just came out of the coal mine, but even then I have reference pictures, just striations of dirt really deep in the pores of their skin. You would see it in the pores of their skin. And don't kid yourself that if you do a really great makeup, which I'm sure you all will always do on everyone that you do, the director might walk past and say, I love that person. Put that person right here next to Tom Cruise. Put that person right here, and then boom, that person gets a speaking line. And then their whole life changes. Because why? Because they look so fantastic.
Is that how you got your first job as a department head?
My first job as a department head. Well, I was a department head on all of my non-union stuff, that's for sure. My first job as a union department head may have been, I'm trying to think, it could have been on a show called Arliss, that Julie Socash, who's now our union president, was my second, and Angela Moss, my friend, was having her baby. So I came in and took over, and Sandra Oh was the lead actress, and we had a lot of fun. That was a really fun show. Yeah, that might have been it. I really have to look at my IMDb.
Do you have an agent?
I think I told you this last time. Never had an agent. I've never had an agent my entire career, and I never had a website, and I was never on Facebook or any of it. When I did Pirates of the Caribbean, I made an agreement with the lead actress. We would never, ever, ever go on Facebook. And then when I did Immortals, I made an agreement with the lead actress. We would never, ever, ever go on Facebook. And then when I was on The Hunger Games, my actors told me I was an idiot and put me on Instagram. And then at the end of 2017, or the end of 2018, people started calling me and saying, you know, there are people that are taking credit for your work. You better put up a website. And I'm really glad that I did, and you can all access it. If you go to my Instagram, it's my Nikoletta dash. Oh, I love this. When I finally went to do it, you know how you buy those GoDaddy sites and all that stuff? When I finally did it, was ready to do it, 2 weeks had lapsed from NikolettaSkarlatos.com. And so this guy called and he said, well, you can have your name, but I own it now. So you can pay me $26,000 for your name. And I said, I don't think so. So it's Nikoletta-Skarlatos.com. Now the guy's contacting me and saying, you can have your name back for $4,000. And I said, I have my name. Nobody can have my name but myself. You fool. I highly recommend, and I said it to you all last time, make yourselves a website. Don't be concerned if you have 3 pictures on it. Put your best work up. Write down who you are, what you're passionate about, you know. Don't worry about not having 5. Don't put 10 pictures up, 7 of which are bad. Actually, if you go to my website, I don't have 500 million pictures up. I could probably add a few, but I think I have the important pictures of the variation of my work. And I struggled over that for the longest time. I was sort of like, oh God, you know, prosthetics, you know, special effects, women's editorial, men's editorial, women character, men character. And so I finally broke it down into the categories that I thought were appropriate. And if you look at my resume, my resume is modeled after really the resume that Leslie Allison and V and that agency uses. So it's quite clear, and it kind of talks about each thing. And if I was nominated for an award or won anything, that's highlighted. It's clarity. Did I ever have an agent? No. I recently got an agent in Paris. We haven't done anything together yet, but I'm in Paris a lot. And so I said to her, maybe if something comes up, we could collaborate. I would consider that for sure. Having an agent doesn't really ever get anybody any work. Everyone will tell you this, but they will certainly negotiate for you. I think that I have gotten my work, I've told you this, through other makeup artists, through the Production Weekly, through producers, through some weird twist of fate, you know, some weird serendipitous thing that happens, life, just drops something in your lap, someone calls you up. But a lot of time it's your peers, it's your makeup friends. I can't do this job today, can you go fill in for me? Why? Because they trust you. They know you're not gonna try to steal their actor. They know you're going to go in and say, listen, I'm here today to do Nicole Kidman. I'm just going to do exactly what you want me to do, and that's the end of it. For example, I did Frida Pinto for something, and she has very specific skin, and she called me up herself and she said, because there was another makeup artist doing her, and she said, did you tell that makeup artist everything she should use on my face? And I said, yes. And she said, well, why would you do that? And I said, because I want you to be, perfect and comfortable, and it's the way that it should be. And, that's the way it goes, I mean, I think that's the correct thing to do. A lot of people would not do something like that, but.
How did you get into the union, and how long did it take you?
A friend of mine told me to go to an interview with a producer, a director, a producer, a UPM, a couple of other people, and the director was also the actor, was also the producer. But they didn't tell me who that was. And they already had their department head. And I said, I don't want to go, And they said, you need to go because the movie's going to flip and then you'll get in the union. I don't want to be in the union. Yes, you need to get in the union. So I went to this interview, and the interview was for a movie called The Brave, and the director, producer, actor was Johnny Depp. And his department head was the great John Caglione Jr., who's an extraordinary makeup artist, who inherited me on that film because the director was picking the second makeup artist. And John Caglione, I mentioned last time, but I'll mention again, won an Academy Award at age 29 for Al Pacino in Batman. And he was nominated for an Academy Award for Heath Ledger. I learned everything about prosthetics from him. He's a master makeup artist. And I mentioned this last time and I'll mention it again. When you want to learn, you go to the best and ask them. Tell them you'll do whatever, you shine their shoes. And so you can watch them. So that's how I got into the union. That happened immediately. That's one way of getting in the union.
Yeah.
Movies flip.
Yeah.
Another question from the live stream. What do directors look for when choosing their makeup artists?
What do directors look for when choosing their makeup artists? I think an even-tempered person. I think somebody who is knowledgeable, somebody certainly who is talented, organized, well-presented, well-spoken, a good listener, and somebody who has ideas. So if you hear about a film and you want to go and interview for it, you should already know something about the film. Not be a Mr. or Miss Know-It-All, but certainly be familiar with it or with the actors. Do your research, even if you bring it up or you don't bring it up, just so you're familiar with what you're dealing with. But I think the directors look for talent and a good disposition. Because you can be the most talented person on earth, but if you're really difficult to get along with or just too dogmatic or something, it doesn't make for a harmonious environment. We all have, filmmaking is really intense. There are 250 people on a set every day running around doing their thing. And everyone, on a great set, everyone has a great old time and gets their job done and works really hard. But somebody who's, I would say, very respectful. Yeah.
Which of your projects would you feel like you've put the most research into?
Oh God.
And was it worth it?
Well, okay. Certainly a ton of, you don't see it here because that's a whole other bat channel. The George Washington movie. Tons of research. I mean, books full of it. Just crazy. This movie, most certainly, you're just seeing a little bit of it. There are books of it here on the table. I didn't really show you this, and I'm not going to go crazy, but I'm just going to show you, principal actors, who they were, what they looked like at first, what then I had to do with them, who they were. Here are my charts. It shows you what I did, what kind of scarification I did, what I used. These are all tests. Sorry, you can't see all this, you guys. I can walk around with it. These are all tests that needed to be approved. Gugu has these scars on her back. I had to do camera tests with them. So there's a lot of that. And this whole book is a makeup design and all the makeup design for the movie. So actually, let me just find you something really quickly. Mahershala's character in this film was called Moses. So he goes through all sorts of, this is just literally throwing on scars and Afrotech hair. Chris Evans threw this Afrotech on Mahershala. I'd say it's a pretty great job. And I put the scars on him, I designed it, did his makeup, did the right makeup color for the screen test. We did the screen test and it was approved, luckily. But then it had to be made, because it's not something you can just throw on every single day. These are some of the scarification that I did for him. One's a Prosade scar, which actually agreed most with his skin. And I painted them. These were just tests because they're way too light for his skin. Different things for the camp. Each thing is a test. Each thing is a test, especially when you're doing this kind of thing. More testing with wig length, wig comfortability. And then he goes into his emancipation look. So it's a completely different look. He has, I don't know if you can see it in this picture. Whoop, gotta be careful. Oh, have a little accidente. Well, I'm gonna hold this for a second. See the beard? Much less beard. once he was emancipated. Can you see that, you guys? Okay. Research. The Hunger Games was a ton of research. The Hunger Games was a big Megillah because the 3 months prior to shooting, we generally shot those films in October. I would probably spend most of the summer researching and doing man days and breaking things down and trying to figure it out. And depending on where we were shooting, the picture of Mahershala, which was Atlanta. First was North Carolina for the very first one. I had to hire people and interview people and get people's resumes and try to hire a harmonious group of people on top of it. There's all that kind of stuff going on. V and I happen to make, I think, a really great team. We balance each other really well. And I'm a department head in my own right, so that worked out extremely well with what we needed to do with such a huge, gigantic movie as that one. You know, if I needed to be in the cornucopia, V could be at the Capitol. And everyone was fine and calm with all of it because we'd already designed everything. We knew what we were doing. We had an excellent, excellent team of makeup artists. You know, it wasn't just the two of us. You do need, like, you know, there are a lot of people on a movie like that. A lot of people.
How big was the makeup team on that?
The biggest days, I think, were like 55. Those crazy Capitol days. We have some great pictures of that. I mean, it's just this gigantic warehouse with lines and lines of mirrors. Tons of product. Mac was very generous with us. Shout out to Mac, Makeup Forever, you know, really fantastic. And we had to get creative. We did. I mean, there was this one makeup artist who made some eyelashes out of, I don't know, some costume thing. And I had to, you know, V and I were discussing this, that we saw each other yesterday. I had to do that makeup on Jenna Malone in like sort of like 20 minutes. I hadn't even really thought about it. It's the one where she has those upside down, like Clockwork Orange eyelashes, and they kind of go down like that. I just didn't, I was sort of like, okay, what am I gonna do? Okay, I'm just gonna do that. Fortunately, it worked. But you have to kind of be able to think on your feet and already be creating, already be thinking. And that's the other thing, I said this last week, but I'll say it again, about background. Background is a great place to be, everybody. And we were discussing this yesterday also. Why? Because you see what other people are doing, you watch how other people work, you learn things from other people, you can check out other people's things, and you do your own thing, and also there's a time frame. And then you sort of learn to work with a group of people. And maybe you kind of find out who your people are, if you will. You know, the kind of people that you like to work with.
How many prep day you got for the
Oh, for which one?
Hunger Games? And also, usually how many days you ask for production from small project or like big project like Hunger Games?
I don't want to misspeak, but I think that, because V was working on a show called Face Off, I think that I went down to Atlanta maybe 3 weeks ahead of time. It's a big prep, that show. It was huge. It's a huge movie. 4 weeks. For Immortals, which was a huge movie, I had only 3 weeks prep, which was not enough prep for that movie at all. Prep has gotten shorter and shorter for a lot of projects. By the way, my friends, it's becoming a little bit more difficult. So I think you have to kind of really ask for the amount of prep that you really need and just be logical. Everything has to be without emotion. You know, I need prep because I need 10 people who are Caucasian to look Asian. So, no, I mean, for example, so I need to do these kinds of makeups. It's going to take 40 minutes with this prosthetic and this and that and the other, for example. I need to lay facial hair. I need to have this much in the budget for this facial hair. I said this last time, and this amount of time to put it on. Then they've got to be set ready. And I also said this last time, but I'm going to repeat it again. When you're on the set, you don't talk, you keep your eyes open, you become friendly with the camera operator and the lighting person, you make sure that your actors are lit properly, and you jump in and out with last looks before anybody tells you to do anything. Because a lot of times they're not going to say last looks, and everyone's going to get mad, and they're going to say the vanities. Just ignore all of that. You can just kindly go up to the ADs and say, we are the makeup department, and we need last looks, and we're standing right here. And if it's all right with you, and you've done your lineup, you're measuring, and everyone knows what the distance is and what the lens is, we are going to jump in now, and we are going to do our touch-up, our last look. In and out. It doesn't have to be a big drama thing, where somebody's running with 25 bags and knocking people over, and you know what I mean? We're not the stars, we're the artists. We're artists.
years and stuff like that, how, I mean, obviously, I'm sure that just you answering my question is not really gonna cover it. So that, to like summarize, do you have some like tips or techniques for how to do that?
Okay, first of all, you have to read that script about 4 times. You really have to focus on the script. And then you have to understand how many, this is something that you have to do, which the script supervisor will do, but usually they do it a week after you need it. You need to do a day and night breakdown. Like when did this beard happen? How long does this beard last? How many days does it play? How many days long is the movie? Maybe the movie actually takes place in 8 days, for example. Okay, for the first 3 days, this person looks like this. Then when do they make the transition? So whatever kind of movie it is, you need to know what the day and night transition is. It's complicated, you know? It's not just, oh, I read a script, the script is great, and I want to do the movie, and I can't wait to do the makeup. That's all great and fine and well, but there are these other elements that you're expected to know. You're expected to know them. So in answer to your question, it depends upon the piece, the movie, but you need to know that script just backwards and forwards, honestly, so that you can, because it will always, always help you. It will never hinder you. When you're on a set, I was recently on a project, and everyone was saying something differently, and I said, no, that's not correct. It's this scene, this day, this time, this makeup. Here it is. I'll go get it. But that's, I mean, because I had to know. I had to know because I had to order a certain number of prosthetics, because I had a budget, because I was responsible. And I'm not saying I was right, but I was right, you know? I mean, I don't mean like I'm this know-it-all. I'm just saying it was correct. It was correct. That's a job, and your crew should know it also, you know? You have to have a really tight crew of really good people, and you have to be able to work together as a team. And I mentioned this last time as well. When you step off the set as the department head, the person who is your second is your standing and acting department head. They have to watch the DIT, they have to watch the monitor, they have to watch the scenes at all times. It's not a social hour. You know, nobody yapping on their phones, none of that stuff. I don't like people sitting around in clumps under their chairs. You know, it's a job, you know. I'm not saying you can't have fun, but there was a really sweet girl here last week, and she was saying, well, they get mad at me if I'm standing up, and then they get mad at me if I'm sitting down. So I stand up until they tell me to sit down. I know that the climates have changed on movie sets, and I feel that it's really important that people receive a proper education about what it means to be a makeup artist in this industry and a hairstylist. And I was really lucky. I've been really lucky because I went after the best, and I watched the best, and I learned from the best, and I watched how things go in background. And, you know, people are getting jobs that they're not quite ready for, and so they haven't learned all these steps. And I think it's important to really educate yourself so that when things get crunched, because they're getting crunched now, particularly in television. Television, you're doing a great show, it's full of prosthetics and beauty and all these things, and right in the middle of the first week, you, the department head, are handed the next episode. So you're meant to watch your actors while you break down the next episode, and you order all the stuff you need for the next episode, which is gonna shoot 9 days from now. It's a little crazy, it's a little intense. It's actually quite intense, television these days. You know, it's becoming more and more, it depends on the project. Yeah. I don't know if I really answered your question.
I know, I was like, it's kind of a tricky question to
Yeah.
just like generally answer, I guess, but I think that's something that I have had the most difficulty like learning. I think, you know a lot of techniques and you know how to like apply them in the moment, but the preparation for like all of this that you're talking about that goes into the breakdown, and so you have the continuity. Like I'm about to work on a project that spans 6 years, so we
Right.
see these multiple
Right.
looks and all of this.
Right.
Like I'm struggling with how to go about that so that I'm organized with it, and so that I do know the continuity for each day to night, and this is
Right.
6 months later, 3 years later.
Right. Well, don't make yourself crazy. First of all, determine how many days long is the movie. Okay, and if it's 6 years long, determine how many years is the first, are the, like, I don't know what years, what years is it?
2005, 2011.
Okay, so how long is 2005? Is it 1/3 of the movie? Is it?
Well, that's the other problem with it is that it's a lot of flashbacks. You like see this a lot of back and forth. It's not a completely linear story.
No, of course it's not. They never are. There are very few people that shoot from beginning to end. That's a really great challenge for you. That's a great lesson for everyone in this room to know, which is you be ready for those flashbacks. Because if you have to change the makeup dramatically, you have to tell your ADs that you're going to need X amount of time. So if they start with some crazy flashback where the guy's he's beaten up, and then all of a sudden he's clean, and then he's beaten up again, you need to go to the AD department very nicely and say, I don't think we're going to make our day because we're on this budget amount of time, and I only get to have 2 people on set with me today. So I think you should start with him clean, and then he can be beaten up. You know, it doesn't always happen that way, but you certainly try to logically explain that. But what you need to do in a situation like that is figure out how many days you have flashbacks and what that person looks like. Do you need a beard? Do you need prosthetics? What do you need for that flashback? Make sure you're covered. Don't ever not have enough of what you need to do your show, even if you run up against a lot of obstacle. Just say, I need this. I will need to have this on hand. This is going to save us X amount of dollars. If I don't have this on hand and I've got to suddenly order this, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars more. Can be a bit of both. Can be a bit of both. Sometimes it's hard to get that. Sometimes it's hard to get that that dollar amount out of said person. For example, you have money for expendables. You have money per episode. You have money for prosthetics. You have money for the build. You have money for the dirt. I don't know. Everything gets broken down. I think that one has to be very persevere and get the answers on those, and then come back with, I can't do it for $60,000 for the prosthetics. It's absolutely impossible. And that's after you have done your research and gone and talked to the top prosthetic guys that you like to use, and the least expensive to the most expensive, and you sort of balance what really makes the most sense, because you do not want to compromise the work. If you're a really great makeup artist, you can create a prosthetic in situ and then 2 minutes later do a Vogue cover magazine, and they're lucky if they have you, and I hope that they recognize it. But nevertheless, all of that costs money. And V brought up something in the beginning before she left, which was when you're personal, you are sort of with this person. Well, that person might only like to wear, I'm just thinking of one actress in general. She only wears La Prairie makeup. And La Prairie makeup, I know, is extremely expensive. I want to say it's $300 a jar or something, is it not? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just some crazy amount of money. I think it is the most expensive, no? Mm-hmm. $350, it's that creamy, yeah. You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. That's it, that's all she's going to use. You better believe that they're going to pay for that. So where are they going to pull that money, It's fascinating. The business is fascinating. Producers do not like ever to accrue meal penalties. This is a big sticking point with producers. So you have to, it's your responsibility to make sure that your people get their breakfast for a sit-down 1/2 hour out of the trailer, which almost never happens, and everyone sacrifices, but that's why we have a union. And just try to allocate time properly, because everyone needs to be nourished and everyone needs to, take a minute. We're not robots, right? Kit fees these days seem to be, for any extra help, seem to be $35 an hour, if I'm not mistaken. General fees are $50 an hour. Some makeup artists can get a fee of $250 an hour. I mean, a day, not an hour. An hour. A day, $100 an hour, $75 an hour. If you're on an editorial, it might be something altogether differently, right? Well, you have your kit. So you have certain things that already belong to you. You should have a day kit and a day playing kit, for example. But when you're on a show, as the department head, you have a budget. Hopefully you work with the department head, if you're not the department head, who shares some of those products with you. And especially if a vendor likes to send products because they want you to try them. And vendors can be very generous sometimes and send a lot of products, which is great. But those are two separate things. The kit fee is one thing, you're bringing your kit, and the budget is another. Two completely separate things.
All right, well, thank you so much, Nikoletta, for being with us.
Thank you guys. Thanks for coming.